name is Adriana, and I'm gonna present my work on microfinance in rural and urban Thailand, policies, social ties, and successful experiences. Microfinance institutions have played a fundamental role delivering broader access to financial services to the poor, but not all the attempts have been successful. So in particular, we can see that the 1 million baht phone program in Thailand has had different experiences over time in terms of default rates. This is striking because this program started at the same time in both rural and urban areas in Thailand. According with the microfinance literature, there is no such thing as best practices. We need to be able to find out what are the policies that work well before we implement a program like that. So the objective of this paper is to analyze what is the effect of different lending policies, such as the use of consignor secure loans, training, and compulsory savings. And also I'm going to look if social ties have an effect on individual loan repayment in microfinance. This program started in 2001 as a microcredit scheme when the government of Thailand decided to give 1 million baht to every community in Thailand, every community in rural and urban areas. And what is 1 million baht fund is around $24,000. And this was to start a locally run rotating credit institution and just to develop occupations and target income generating activities. The lending policies that they adopted, the most common one was to ask for consignors. So, okay, let's talk about the data. As I said, I'm gonna use household, institutional, and community level data from the 1000 Thai project data collection. Okay, this data, this survey started in rural areas, started in 1997, and in urban areas in 2005. So but in urban areas we have retrospective information. So I'm focusing only in the period 2004 to 2007, so that I can compare information between rural and urban settings. Our sample includes 960 households per year, and we're following these people from 960 in rural areas, 960 in urban areas, and we're following them from 2004 to 2007. I'm focusing on 3 policies. If they offer only consign loans, compulsory savings, and training. In order to identify the effect of social capital and lending policies on loan repayment, we're going to use a linear probability model and a probit model. And the reduced form specification is the probability of the repayment outcome or the default outcome, which is going to be my case. It's going to be measured, as I said, at the household level, and this is going to depend on the measure of social capital that I'll explain later on. A set of dummy variables that are going to indicate whether the fund uses the policy or not, and a set of household-specific characteristics, and a set of loan-specific characteristics. Okay? As measure of social capital, I'm using 3 different variables. The first one is best cooperation, and the other 2 measures are 2 index for sharing. So the first one is sharing with relatives, and the second one is sharing with non-relatives. We see that urban areas, the default rates are much higher than the default rates in rural areas, and in rural areas they're around 2-3%. We have some exceptional cases in Buira in 2006 and Lopburi in 2005, but other than that, they're pretty much low. But in urban areas, they have been striking high all over the period. We cannot say anything about urban areas in terms of social capital. If people share more with the relatives in terms of money, in terms of labor, or in terms of equipment, then default rates go down. And how do I interpret these results? Well, social capital, social ties matter in rural communities. Yeah, and in the other case, well, we don't find anything. But if we look at the measure of sharing with non-relatives, we can see that in the case of urban communities, it has a positive sign. I mean, it's statistically significant and has a positive sign. We have the three policies that I'm analyzing: the cosigner, the compulsory savings, and the training. So if we just analyze these three policies, what we find is that, in fact, warrantor does not show to have an effect on default rate, while compulsory savings and training show a negative statistically significant effect. If we just compare the same communities with different levels of social capital, or with, then we see that warrantor works better where social ties are stronger. The compulsory savings interacted with social capital has a positive sign. So what that means is that compulsory savings and social capital may be complements. For urban areas, as we saw before, social capital measure doesn't have, it's not statistically significant, but the measure for sharing with non-relatives is still positive and significant. Now, we do find that warrantors plays a role here. It didn't play a role in the rural communities. Okay, so the conclusions. Well, what do we find? We find that social ties have a significant and negative effect on delinquency, but only in communities in rural areas. We don't find an effect on urban areas. Also, when we look at sharing with relatives, when the social ties between relatives are tight, we see that this effect goes in the same direction that cooperation among people in the community. In urban communities, we find the contrary. So we find the social ties between non-relatives have a positive effect on delinquency. But this may be due because people in urban areas do not care on reputation, because they do not interact that much with people in the same neighborhood as people in rural areas do. And regarding lending policies, we find different effects. We see that cosigner secured loans seems to work fine in urban areas, and we don't find an effect in rural areas. But also we see that cosigner secured loans work better when the social ties of the institution of the community are stronger. Compulsory savings have a negative effect on default in rural areas, and training also has a negative effect in both rural and urban areas. What I think is that these results may not suggest causality, but the correlations, I think, are interesting in terms when one need to think on how to design a program like this. Yeah. So we see that cooperation is important, and we can have these measures of how networks and how social ties work in a given community, before even we think about the structure of the fund. Some of them work better with social ties, and some of them don't. Yeah. So, yeah, that's it.